In 1937, my family went on a hunting safari in East Africa with one of the most prolific big game hunters of the time. His name, J.A. Hunter. While known for leading the rich and famous on safari, J.A. is also remembered for the thousands of rhinos, elephants, and other wildlife he shot while working for the Kenyan Game Department. Today, his grandson, Alex Hunter, works to conserve the very wildlife his grandfather became famous for killing. A third-generation Kenyan, Alex is a passionate conservationist who leads safaris and mountaineering trips from his camp in the Kenyan highlands. Armed with my family's journals and video footage from their 1937 safari, I traveled to Kenya to spend time with Alex, to see what wildlife populations look like today compared to 80 years ago, and most importantly, to discover what the biggest threat is to wildlife today. It isn't what I was expecting. By the way, my name is Hunter. So Alex, I'm really excited to be here. This has been a project long in the planning. You know, the whole basis of this was those historical films and journals from my family back in 1937 when they came on safari with your grandfather. And your grandfather's mentioned in there frequently. He's visible dozens of times in the films. And I wanted to come back and see what's changed.
Hunter, massive things have changed. One is that what our grandparents did, you can't do anymore. You can't do it legally in some places, you can't do it ecologically in others, but the wildlife, the theme and all of that is there. Geez, 3 black rhinos. You know, in the Serengeti now, there's, I don't know, 9, 10.
That's it?
Oh, maybe a bit more, but I tell you what, not much. No, yeah.
It's just painful to watch.
That is. Yeah, that is. From that time in 1937 to 2018, this species is now on the brink of extinction. And it wasn't then. It was abundant then. It was they were actually a pest.
Yeah, and that's why they sent your grandfather out to eradicate it.
Yeah, his job was to go out and clear land because they couldn't actually put in schools, health, education, anything because of rhino. Rhino were stopping them developing a district. There's not a rabbit there now. We are 50 million people. So in 1937, it was probably 2 million or 3 million. 50 million people in this country now. And that's going to be one of the huge changes that we're going to come across. A constant theme in all the conservationists that we meet and we talk to and you will get to see. It's going to be human-wildlife conflict. Come in, Hunter, it's after you.
Thank you.
I'm going to get a map out, yeah? And let's take a seat here and let me show you where we're going to go. We're going to cover one of the biggest contiguous conservation areas in Kenya today, the whole Amboseli, Chulu, Tsavo ecosystem. We're going to cover it on foot, we're going to cover it in a Super Cub, in a car, and I'm going to really just show you and tell you this story of how it changes from here to Tsavo West, to the middle of Tsavo East, where all the handful of big elephant are left. And then we're going to finish off in my home on Old Pejeta and tell you that story of conservation, how vital it is, how it works, and the differences between 3 totally separate ecosystems, but how they're all trying to save elephant, doing conservation, dealing with people, dealing with education, dealing with water, dealing with human-wildlife conflict, and as importantly, if not more importantly, involve Kenyans in that whole scenario. So really, this is a film about people that care for wildlife and people. So those are the Chulu Hills, yeah, at 1 o'clock.
Yep.
And that's where we're going Hunter, what's happened, if you like, is that all the large mammals, especially the rhino, the elephant, what existed here has just been pushed into those hills. And the reason they're in those hills is because nothing else can live there. I mean, even man, the ultimate super predator, struggles to live there because there's no water, it's lava, it's really fit for a lizard. But these rhinos have just managed to eke out an existence, as these elephants have, but elephants need more space, they need huge areas. Rhino from here, actually as the crow flies, they're in those hills. There was literally at one stage in this whole area, probably certainly thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And we're left with the last few.
Arriving at our camp in the Chulu Hills with a view of Mount Kilimanjaro, we immediately feel transported in time. Turns out, some things haven't changed that much in the 80 years since my grandfather, Walter Sykes, was here. In the evening, we invite one of the founders of the Big Life Foundation, Richard Bonham, to join us for a chat around the campfire. Richard's wife, Tara, is Alex's sister and J.A. Hunter's granddaughter.
Big Life's been around about 25 years, actually more like 30. We started as a Moss Island Preservation Trust and then morphed into Big Life in about 2010. That started with 4 men. I think we're up to about 250 rangers right now, over obviously a much bigger area. So it began there, and then entrees into the community, trying to get educational scholarships, developing schools. As that was growing, conflict came over the horizon. Conflict has always been there. Human-wildlife conflict has been there forever.
As Kenyans whose ancestors were both hunters, Richard and Tara have a deep understanding of the history and changes that have occurred over time.
You know what Tara's grandfather was dealing with. It's an old story, he had to shoot 1,000 rhino just across these hills here. And that was essentially conflict because he was clearing areas for settlement. He had to get rid of those rhino in order to allow people to come in and settle. My father was in the game department in that same era. He was a little bit younger than J.A., but my father shot 800 elephants in his time as an elephant control officer. And that was basically shooting elephant that were coming into farms. Where I came in contact with that whole scene was trying to bring people in line with wildlife and to live with wildlife. And they were saying, yeah, but look, they're raiding my farms. The lions are killing my cows. In J.A.'s and my father's era, they dealt with it with a bullet. That's how you dealt with that situation. You just kill that animal. Obviously, you can't do that in this day and age. And you shouldn't do that in this day and age. So you have to think out of the box and think, what can you do to address these issues? Because if you want people to live with wildlife, you can't have them suffering.
Early in the morning, we head out to meet up with some Big Life rangers. We want to see what they do on a daily basis to protect the rhino that still remain in this area.
It's called Longariti Ranger Post, and that's like an outpost on the edge of the Chulu National Park, and we're going to go in there, we're going to meet some rangers, and we're going to do a patrol with them, go out for 3-4 hours and walk in their shoes, and we're there to really see the environment that these rhinos have been pushed into, and the handful really that are left. Literally up until maybe the last 50 years, 40 years, this was a very successful species. If it's not pursued by humans, it has really no natural enemies apart from maybe lion occasionally. And really to be driven to the edge of extinction purely because of man's vanity and greed, says it all, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So tell me what you all do here and what your mission is.
The reason why we are just here to protect the animals. So the number of rhinos we have is inside here, figure 8.
8.
Yeah.
And do you have a lot of poachers coming in trying to get to those rhinos, or is it just a few now and then?
Nowadays, no poachers.
Because you guys are here doing your...
We are there. These are our colleagues helping us. Nowadays, we can now see from 4 to 5 years, the poachers, the number is now low. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay, we can now move.
With the Big Life Rangers, who are accompanied by the Kenyan Wildlife Service, known as KWS, we set out to see what evidence we could find of wildlife in this area.
You can see there's an elephant being through here. I mean, these roads are as old as any Roman road in Europe, but it's just made by an elephant. Guys, just by chance, if we bump into an elephant or anything, you just do not run. Just stay where you are, yeah, and hope for the best, because we'll never keep up with one of these fellas.
So it means it was just here, really. There were 2 rhino, maybe has a kid. Are you seeing the footstep of the smaller one? The smaller one. So this one for the smaller. It means they were just here. This day.
Yeah,
it was just around here. This morning.
Look at that. So this is the mother and calf.
Yeah, the mother and the calf.
And the male one.
The male one.
So they say there was 3.
There are 3.
And the fact that there's 3 and a calf, you've got to be optimistic about it. So they were probably here when we were having breakfast, just lying down here. What I've been thinking is, as we've been walking, really, do we value this and what's left as much as we value something by Michelangelo or the Sistine Chapel or something like that? Is this also not our heritage and so much more valuable, really?
Yeah.
Or as valuable, rather, than all of what we sort of completely idolize in the West? Anyway, we'll press on. Great, that was good. Good to see that. At least we know there's some here.
Yeah.
We hiked over 8 miles that day through the dense bush to look for signs of rhinos. We checked one of the camera traps to see what wildlife had been there, and we even encountered an elephant while on foot. With Alex's sage advice in mind, we didn't run. By the end of the day, we had developed a strong appreciation for the daily efforts of the Big Life and KWS Rangers to keep these 8 remaining rhinos safe. In addition to protecting rhinos, Big Life helps mitigate the human-wildlife conflict that often occurs between elephants and communities. Big Life constructs elephant fences to keep wildlife and farming areas separate.
So basically it's full-on farming, dense farming from here all the way up to Kilimanjaro. All these farmers who've had 15 years of intense pressure from elephants coming and destroying their farms. So we put this fence in because all the other mitigation measures weren't working.
Most people typically think of a fence, especially for an elephant, would be 10 feet high and 9 strands of wire, and this is low. It's lower than we are tall.
Technology has developed so fast over the last sort of 15, 20 years, and this seems to be the most effective method, especially for elephant. And that's the main species we've got to think about here.
So it's electrified. These stick out. The elephants don't like to come into them because it's going to just poke them in the chest, and it's like a giant thorn.
Without these, the elephants soon learn that they get a tusk onto a post, they can break it, and that stops them getting close to break it.
And so far, they've been really effective.
Touch wood. It's worked really well.
This is your connecting corridor between...
That's all we got left.
That's all we have.
We're fortunate as much. This has always been the main link. You get the old matriarchs would have been crossing here 50 years ago. This is the route they'd have used. We don't have to redirect them. We're just aligning them based on their original corridor.
To hear firsthand from the local community about the impact of the fence, we spoke to a tomato farmer whose crops are right next to the elephant fence and wildlife corridor.
This fence that we have here that's keeping the animals out, have you seen a good effect on your farm?
This fence here,
Yeah.
it is really helping us,
Yeah.
we as farmers.
Because without the fence, the elephants, the animals would be coming
Animals becoming, especially elephants,
in. Yeah,
they will interfere with the whatever we are doing here.
yeah,
But it's very much important.
yeah.
We then spoke to the landowner's son, Thomas, who is a Maasai farmer. His father recently agreed to lease Big Life part of his land so that the elephant corridor could be expanded.
Got a quick question for you. Since you've seen the fence come through here, your land, what benefits have you seen?
We see a lot of importance of the fence, since one, the wild animals are not just tampering with our crops.
Yeah,
That's number one.
yeah,
Before we get the fence, the elephants, the buffaloes, and sometimes hippopotamus, they are just living there,
yeah,
which is very dangerous to our children and also our livestock.
Mm-hmm.
But now we are living very freely. We have a very good atmosphere and environment just because of the fence.
Yeah.
The other important thing about this fence, the time when the elephants or any wild animal are crossing through the corridor, all the people who are surrounding are very aware that they cannot interfere with that animal when he crosses through the corridor, because that place is being paid because of that wild animal. That place is just safe there for the path of the elephant, so that the elephant go freely and very peaceful on the river. Yeah.
So the elephant's paying for its passage.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
much. Yeah. Next stop, the Big Life Foundation headquarters to learn more about the wildlife and community conservation efforts that Big Life works on.
You know, as we were talking earlier, conservation is not just about wildlife. People are probably the most important link in the chain. So we've got different programs here which, you know, address people issues. You know, we've got an education department. Well, our main thing is basically sponsoring students on wildlife scholarships. Then we got our predator compensation program, which basically replaces livestock killed by predators. Then we got security. Then you got radio rooms. Then you've got monitoring, evaluation, law enforcement, you know, following up the court cases. Yeah, so a lot happening here.
To understand the challenges facing wildlife today, we meet Francis, who is head of security, and view the elephant boards that Big Life uses to track mortalities.
These boards here, I think, illustrate our situation so well. This is elephant mortality going back to 2011. The red is poached animals. The green is animals that have died through human-wildlife conflict in some form or other. And you can see how it's shifted. You know, the red fading out more to green. And then, okay, a little spate of poaching here, but then from here it's all green.
Yeah,
So poaching is not our problem right now.
it's conflict with
It's conflict. It's all conflict. You know, there's a few other things that you need to pick up from this. Why is it gone from red to green? One answer is the work of Francis and his guys. It's those guys that have turned that scene. If it wasn't for them, that red would be throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what leads to conflict? Basically two main things. One is crop raiding. These animals going to farms and then they get speared, and then they also have conflict with people, kill them, you know, in those raids. So then that triggers a reaction from the community and they go and spear more elephant. Or you have to go and shoot the elephant that kills somebody. And then the other one is just, you know, people walking out in the bush, you know, herders bump into an elephant. You know, maybe he's been in a farm the night before and had a spear thrown at him, or in a bad mood, or just, you know, naturally bad-tempered for some reason, maybe in musk, bump into people, kill them, and then that sets a reaction from the community.
The community goes after them, takes
Yeah,
them down.
yeah.
Not only does Big Life use rangers and tracker dogs on the ground to stop conflict between humans and wildlife and to catch poachers, but they also conduct frequent aerial surveillance flights. Richard took me up for a ride to see the greater Amboseli ecosystem where Big Life operates.
That's one of our outposts down there.
How often do you make these flights over this area?
We have a plane over here probably once a week, in this whole area. So, coming up here is the Kimana Swamp, or was the Kimana Swamp. Now it's been taken over by farmers irrigating off the swamp. So, this is where we have a lot of conflict. You see, there's no barrier between the wildlife and the farming. So we have a lot of conflict coming across here, wildlife coming in and taking tomatoes, maize, beans.
From the air, you can really see how close it is right up to towns and farms.
Yeah.
Well, this beats the hell out of a safari drive.
Unfortunately, elephants and locals still encounter each other, and the result can often be fatal. Recently, Big Life lost one of the first local men to become a ranger when he crossed paths with an elephant on his way to work one morning.
The first Big Life ranger, a guy called Kyo, from this community, and he kind of took the leap of faith to join Big Life. Kyo was the first guy from this community to do that. Tragically, about 4 months ago, walking on his way to work, he was killed by an elephant. So he was not only the first guy to do it, but he also lost his life trying to save wildlife. So we're off to meet his widow, and I just wanted you to see that. I wanted you to see the reality of this woman and her future now, and her life, which was dependent on wildlife conservation and elephants. She lost her husband to that, and the future she had no holes. And it's, you know, it's one thing for us to sort of drive past in our cars and sort of see all of this. It's something else to actually go and see them and actually see how Kenyans in a very rural community like this live, the challenges they face, and comparatively what little can improve their lives immensely. You know, $100 goes a long way in a place like this.
With the help of James, who works with Alex at his camp, we spoke to Kior's mother, his 2 sons, and his widow Agnes to better understand what his work with Big Life meant to the family.
Okay, what he's saying is the elephants and everything, wildlife we have is important to her. But the best thing to do is we protect them to stay in the park so that they can't come in to destroy crops, maybe injure people.
Is there a way that she can tell me how and what her husband felt about the job he did? It's like a policeman dying in, you know, in duty. Yeah,
exactly,
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing.
So what he's saying is, because of the work that he had, they were fine with it, but that thing happened, they are satisfied with that because they knew all the things they had for this family came from the wildlife.
Although she lost her husband to it, she's accepting that everything that she got was actually from wildlife. It was from elephants, and it was from Big Life, or the security that job gave her. Although she's paid a huge price, which her life will always be different now because her husband, well, he was killed by an elephant, let's face it, on his way to work. And that's the reality of living and protecting wildlife in a place like this. Bless her, really, because, you know, she said that, you know, she doesn't have a problem with elephants and rhinos and all of that. I mean, she can see the value in everything that they bring, but she just wants them to have their space and, you know, these guys to have their own space. And, you know, that's a theme that is really just going to be apparent in everything that we do, is that this really is all about human-wildlife conflict. The future of wildlife, the future of conservation, that's what one has to address.
So when you hear about elephants being killed by farmers and pastoralists and villagers, to them it's a matter of life and death, surviving this year versus not surviving at all. When to us, we think about it, or at least those of us in the West, think about it as a loss of another elephant. And we don't really take that into account, that these people are fighting for their well-being and for their families and for their lives.
And here we are, sort of insisting that it's their moral duty to look after elephants and lions when they can be killed by them. This is a community that lives off the land. Yeah? They plant maize, they plant pumpkins, they plant pawpaws, they plant beans, they plant all of that stuff. That is how they live. And that is how they survive. These guys living off the land, and it's tough. So an elephant comes along and eats it all, and you think, what are the answers? Yeah, the answers are that you have to have this separation. You have to have the infrastructure and the security that allows those elephants to be in their natural environment, but allows this expanding young Kenyan population. What we see today, if you take the average age, Hunter, it'll be a teenager. And we've got to provide a future for them as well. And the win-win would be to provide a future that secures them, that actually looks after the environment and gives them a role or a future in tourism or wildlife conservation.
Before we leave the Chulus, James invites us to his home near the town of Makindu. We meet his family, see his farmland, and as a special treat, watch his father Peter and the local women perform a traditional Wakamba dance. The whole village shows up to see the performance.
So Hunter, what we're doing today, we're driving basically right the way through the Savo West and Savo East. And with the Chulus and Amboseli, it's really probably the largest contiguous wildlife conservation area in Kenya, one of the largest in East Africa, and probably one of the largest in Africa as a whole. Lots of challenges, new railway put in, new road coming in, busiest road in Africa cuts the way through it. And you'll see the topography changing from this sort of ancient granitic nice scenery down till we get across into the red, flat, hot lowlands of Savo.
We arrive in Savo East National Park and meet up with Richard Mahler, the founder of the Savo Trust. Born and raised in Kenya, Richard also happens to be a childhood friend of Alex's.
One of the reasons I wanted Hunter to come here was to really see one of the last great elephant habitats. And elephants need space, and by protecting them, you're in turn protecting the environment and the bigger picture.
Richard, how many elephant are in Savo East?
As of the end of February last year, there were 12,866.
As far as you know, what's the highest estimate that this Savo area would have held?
The Savo ecosystem, not very long ago, late 60s, early 70s, had approximately 45,000 elephants. And it also had 8,000 rhino.
8,000 rhino.
In the 1973 count, it was estimated to hold 8,000 rhino in this ecosystem. In Savo East, there's 15. In Savo West, there's 94 in the sanctuary, and there's a further 20 outside.
So in our lifetime, from 8,000 to give or take 150, less, 130.
But Alex, in 1973, there were 8,000.
Yeah.
In 1983, just 10 years later,
Yeah.
there were 6. And they formed the founding population of Ungalia Rhino Sanctuary in Savo West.
That is a good positive.
There's some up here.
There's one. There's 2. One looks like it's nice.
Have you got your bin?
Yeah, I do. Hold on. One definitely. The one on this side, the one on the right looks like a beautiful one.
Haven't you managed to purchase any decent ones?
Oh, shut up, man. They're bloody Leica. They're
I
the
mean,
best.
these are epoxy little...
They're Leica.
This is what they use in opera houses, for Christ's sakes.
At least I have a pair.
We soon get close to a big tusker elephant. This designation is only given to elephants whose ivory tusks weigh over 100 pounds each.
As far as I am aware, there's about a maximum of 25 across Africa, 100-pounders. Iconic tuskers such as this. So in Savo, we've got 7 big guys like this, and another 23 emerging tuskers. So the other one's called Toothpick. He's an emerging tusker. He might be, give him another 5 to 10 years, he could be one of the 100-pounders of tomorrow. And Eastern Africa was really famous for in the hunting days is that the ivory was very pretty. It was very long, it was very symmetrical, just like his. His tusks are probably not even a pound difference between the left and the right. They're perfect. The gene pool in Savo is still so crystal clear here. So like this elephant, 4 years ago, in fact even 2 years ago, he was in our emerging tusker category. He was probably a 90 pounder. He's definitely up there now. He's not an old bull. He's probably got another, given the chance, at least 15 years of life left, at least.
Like you, mate.
Bit like, yeah. Whereas Alex is like this one on this side, maybe 5 years, Yeah, so I suppose one of the messages here is, J.A. Hunter would have probably looked at that elephant and turned his nose up and thought, no way, it's too small. Something a little bit larger than that were plentiful in his day, but they're not all gone. And so what that elephant represents is a real positive in an elephant world of today where we always talk about poaching this and poaching that and human-wildlife conflict this and human-elephant conflict that. But there are some positives, and Savo does throw up some of those real wonderful positives like that elephant, and just give him a handful of years, literally a handful of years, and he would have been an elephant that J.A. would have thought, wow, that's a really nice one. There are 100-pounders, there are elephants that die naturally of old age in Savo. Where on this mad old planet that we live in today, where can you genuinely say elephants die of old age there? Not many places. So there is hope. Given space, unfortunately Savo does provide that, and given a bit of time, there are some real positives in what is otherwise a pretty negative elephant world.
The next morning, we learn more about Savo Trust and the various projects they work on.
Yeah, so Savo Trust is a relatively new conservation organisation. We essentially are a support body to the Kenya Wildlife Service, that's the government wildlife agency in this country. So all the funds that we raise for aerial support, ground operations alongside KWS and vehicles and equipment and technical support is all under the Big Tusker project. Then there's a community conservancy program with Kamungi on the north. Then there's an animal welfare program, and that is really catering for sick and injured and orphaned generally speaking, small mammals that need another chance in life. So on average, throughout the month, throughout the year, there's one tusker sighting every single day from the various ground teams and the aerial coverage. We do approximately 70 to 80 hours a month, and each flight varies between 1 and 6 hours. So we have 2 Super Cubs, 2 pilots. We provide quite a lot of rapid response to the Kenya Wildlife Service. So for example, if there were gunshots heard, we're pretty much one of the first people to be called to provide that aerial backup. So yeah, 2017 recovered 241 elephant tusks. By far and away the brunt of those were from elephant that had died in the drought, and there were 101 arrests made between KWS and Savo Trust. That varies from elephant poachers to ivory dealers. I think there were 11 ivory dealers last year with over 300 odd kilos of ivory recovered.
So Rich, today you flew up. You see anything that was interesting that we can go and check out?
We found a decent herd of buffalo, several hundred. Large herds of buffalo are scarce these days.
Few and far between, absolutely.
Just because their
habitat.
Habitat is shrinking, space ain't there, and it would be good to show that there are still decent herds here.
It's not just about elephant, it's everything that kind of tags onto the elephant. So by saving that, or by helping ensure the security of them, you do actually the whole chain.
We're using elephant as a flagship species to actually cover everything else.
Yeah.
The ground and aerial presence in support of Kenya Wildlife Service is trickling all the way down, even down to a dik-dik.
To a dik-dik, which are then, of course, in community areas, one of the most heavily poached little antelope, because they have a small territory, pair for life, easy to get. If you get one, you get 2.
So the vast majority of wire snares that we recover are dik-dik snares. And when you walk through the bush looking for such a thing, it's very thin, often rusted wire. So it's a really difficult thing to pick out. The Kenya Wildlife Act was upgraded in 2013 with far more stringent fines and jail sentences and regulations. And that's a huge positive step. In fact, it's one of the reasons why elephant poaching today is decreased dramatically. So in 2013, our first full year of operation, we found 116 carcasses poached. In 2017, last year, we found a total of 14 poached elephant, and we have 4 ground teams and 2 aeroplanes.
Yeah, and
so
kind
far
of
greater coverage.
Yeah, double the flying time and everything. Well, that's a fantastic story.
And, that's a 80% reduction in 4 years.
That's where you and KWS are obviously working really well together.
Yeah, it's certainly not because of Savo Trust, but we play a small role in that positive downward trend.
Yeah.
To hear more from the rangers who work in the field, we drive out to a Savo Trust outpost and meet with one of their ground units, which are called Tembo teams.
This is KWS Dakota Outpost,
right,
southern boundary of Savo East.
What are the main pressures that you 2 teams face here? Is it charcoal? Is it livestock? Is it the history of elephant poaching? What are the particular pressures that Dakota faces?
The main pressure that we face right now is the poaching of animals that mainly is ongoing around the Giriama Ranch area.
Right.
And that is mainly because the community out there, they haven't found anything better to do.
Sure.
Yesterday we had a meeting with them, and their outcry was one: to help you to stop this poaching, give us just one thing. We'd like to join you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they told us, we'd like to join you. And we told them, the Savo Trust has a plan for that, but you cannot continue doing the wrong thing because you don't have anything to do. Show us you're ready to stop it, then everything will fall into plan. And so far, Mr. Richard has done a tremendous in that by recruiting people from the
of course. What would be your ideal scenario here then?
So I think firstly what Valentine came up with there was pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's absolutely true. Without bringing the people that border onto this park, without bringing them on board as a meaningful stakeholder in conservation here, we're just going to continue with the same old.
The whole way.
The human population continues to increase, and so the pressures on the protected area continue to increase. We want to engage with the people of Shirango the people of Dakota. You know, the big tusker of this area a few years ago was Satao. He was actually poached literally not far from here, but he was right on the boundary of the park, so it was too easy for somebody outside, you know, seeing that ivory, just thinking, wow, you know, it's too easy. So by not engaging with them, that's not an option, because it's not working. So they have to be brought in as a stakeholder.
The thing is, it makes just so much sense. We're all Kenyans, one way or the other, And with KWS providing, if you like, one leg and Savo Trust the other, then this community can really go.
No, for sure.
For our final stop in Savo East, we drive to the north side of the park where Richard and his family live. Joined by Richard's 2-year-old son, Russell, we head out to learn more about several local projects with the Wakamba community. The Savo Trust recognizes that wildlife conservation efforts are most successful when they go hand in hand with community work.
So Kamungi Conservancy was set up to create a buffer to the protected area. This is the protected area of Savo East National Park. And the plan is to create that protective buffer to safeguard the natural resource extraction that the local communities were carrying out here, from ivory poaching to bushmeat to charcoaling to hardwood extraction and so on.
All of that,
Yeah, but then at the same time to try and create some alternative livelihoods and stakeholdership really of the local people and get them more engaged within environmental and habitat protection. As I say, this conservancy is in its infancy.
Right, early days.
Early days.
Yeah. But it's your home?
It's my home, it's many of my employees' home. So it's a registered CBO, which is a community-based organization. The first steps were employment. So between Savo Trust, my own personal employees, a couple of the others that have bought in this area, we employ a total of 36 people out of a total workforce of 46.
Brilliant.
What that does actually puts back into the 2 villages of Kamungi Conservancy approximately $7,000 US a month.
Wow.
Into a community that a handful of years ago
had nothing.
Would barely have had $700 a month, if that. And then the second thing is, you know, now you see it very green. This is very, very unusual. Normally it's dry as a bone.
It's poor country. It's hard country.
It's hard country. The local people are having to walk up to 6 kilometers a day to get one 20-litre jerry can of water. So we thought, right, a fast way to get the people on board that we mean business is to put in a water project.
Perfect.
The dream of having water on tap in the local village is absolutely a reality now.
For 2 or 3 generations, these people from Nguluni and this conservancy that you have created have had nothing. They've had no healthcare, they have had no bare education, they have had nothing. So actually, this enables them to really, for the first time in their lives, get a hold of something that belongs to them. And you know, that's a huge empowerment feeling to have. So fantastic. Oh man, I'm really looking forward to this. That'd be great. How many people drink a day or take water from there? Like how many families roughly?
Maybe 400.
400 families, huh?
Yeah.
So this one project has really changed your lives?
Yes, we have changed the life.
Really? Yeah.
Now they are changed their mind.
Yeah.
They are not snaring, no poaching.
Yeah,
They
no
know,
snaring, no poaching.
Sometimes when the children are going to fetch the water at the river, sometimes they meet with the elephants and the animals, and that is dangerous. But now, there's no children going to the river.
Yeah, there's
and
security.
Also our animals now, they are free.
Security, education. I mean, it's win-win-win.
We will build a small education centre here with all the aspects to it, you know, water management, wildlife-related things, and we'll build a small house for Joseph. By the way, none of this project would have happened without this guy.
Joseph, you're the guy, eh?
Yeah. Joseph,
you put it together.
He has been
well done, brother.
Absolutely my right-hand man when it's come to many, many issues.
journey out of Tsavo East takes us through parts of Kenya that Alex knows well from his childhood. He provides insights into how things have changed in the last 50 years.
This I remember growing up, in certain times of year, there'd be a wildebeest migration, sort of extension of the Amboseli wildebeest migration, coming up at times like this to catch the rains. You know, wildebeest are sort of on this perpetual cycle to look for grass, and I do remember and recall these plains just being thick with wildebeest. I mean, like ticks. And now, now it's sad. That's all largely gone. Through agriculture, people, the breaking up of the land, the ecosystem. I grew up in this area, and this was all in coffee estates, you know, and coffee was really that's what Kenya made, how it made its foreign exchange. As Nairobi expanded, the coffee market really lost its value, and what replaced that was an economic residential boom as Nairobi got bigger, and this is now really Nairobi suburbia for a lot of Nairobians.
We arrive at Mount Kenya, which is the highest peak in the country. We drive up the mountain to meet with Susie Weeks, the executive director of the Mount Kenya Trust. Her organization focuses on reforestation, wildlife, and people.
Susie, what are your three biggest challenges that you have?
Destruction of the forest.
For logging?
For logging, charcoal burning, which is logging as well. Yes. Anyway, actual kilns within the forest, and wildlife poaching.
Snares by dogs, by everything.
Yeah, snares.
Is it bushmeat?
Mainly bushmeat. Okay. Ivory still. Yeah. But not on the scale we're talking about between 2009 and 2012, 13. As with the whole country, it's dropped off really, really steadily since then. But yes, mostly it's logging. Okay. In terms of this habitat for the wildlife.
Susie, tell us the story of how you patrol it, what you do, what these guys get up to. Tell us how this works.
We've got a few teams around the mountain, and most of them are foot patrol teams. This team, it was sort of my idea / dream to have a horse patrol team, just because you can cover so much more ground on horseback and get away more quickly as well if you're encountering a big problem. And we've got 10 horses and 6 guys.
Brilliant.
On this team.
And all local community?
All local community. Nobody knew how to ride before they came to us. Well, they may have seen a horse, but even that one was fairly unlikely.
Okay.
For me, it's really important that they're from here.
Yeah. Hardy little ponies.
So the Trust has actually been planting indigenous trees since about 2004, but the onus on us, there were not many other people doing it there, and we felt that we had to really, really start building up those targets. And we've got a good reputation now for tree planting because we monitor it properly, and we've got some good donations, and we've got very, very high targets for 3 million trees for the next 3 to 5 years.
All indigenous?
All indigenous.
Fantastic.
All conservationists know that you can't really protect an area without bringing the community in. Yeah. And so that initially started as human-elephant conflict resolution with fences. Mm-hmm. But you have to go further than protecting people from the elephants on their shambas. You have to go much further that in terms of lighting a spark and changing ideas. And that involves education for us, directly going into schools. And we found over time that it's a really difficult one for kids, because what you're saying is like, look at all this mass destruction. We've got to plant trees and we've got to be this person. But who created the mass destruction? It's not actually the kids who are there. They haven't even had a chance to cut down a single tree themselves. It's the previous generation. Yes. And to try and go in there and say, look, we've done wrong and I'm really sorry about what we've left you.
It's like a historical misdemeanor in a way. Yeah.
And then we've embarked on a community health project, which is some curative stuff and some educational stuff, but it also involves family planning. Our focus is on healthy families.
Great.
Keeping young girls in school. Yeah. Because that's the major problem. Families that aren't planned and girls that leave school before they've even finished and don't have
14,
a single
15,
chance.
16, I mean, that's it. Yeah, their lives are not over, but they, it's sad. Yeah. Do you find it difficult? Is that a mindset which local communities are reluctant to accept, or do they get it? It's just a matter of how to get there.
They get it. It is a matter of how to get there. So you'll find that the women that come to us for assistance with family planning, commodity or advice, or even HIV testing, they know where they can get those facilities or commodities, but they haven't got time or the money necessarily to get on a boda, then get on another form of transport and go into town and then pay quite a lot of money. And then have to maybe do that 3 months later if they've only been given 3 sets of pills, for example. So they do get it and they want to talk to people.
Before leaving Mount Kenya, we head down the mountain to see the new road underpass for wildlife that the Mount Kenya Trust worked to establish. A local farmer explains the impact of this underpass and the elephant corridor.
We used to have constant elephant problems, and they were a pain. And I'd spend my whole time just chasing them. And ever since I've been on the farm, we've always had issues down here, and we said, look, let's just put it where we have an issue, because the elephant are likely to go where they've already been coming through. It's quite an ask to ask an elephant, right, okay, there you go, sort yourself out. But then I think we had 300 underpasses or 300 elephant passes. It's not the, the different elephant, but you're probably looking at 60 elephant maybe used it. Then it went up to 300.
Wow.
And then the best year we had was 1,200 elephant going underneath. So even if you took that down to 300 elephant, we never had elephant of those numbers going through the farm. It's a migratory route now for primarily elephant. And it doesn't seem to be really an issue with timing anymore now. It was initially all night passes. Now, during the day, 17 elephant, 1 o'clock. Traffic.
So there's traffic the whole time.
This is what we call being adaptable, fitting it into a road structure that we put in. They just sort of went, okay, fine, if that's what you want, we'll go through there. This is now ingrained. This is never going to change.
In their DNA.
Absolutely.
For our final stop, we arrive at the Old Pejeta Conservancy, which is widely considered a model for how to combine wildlife conservation with a working cattle ranch. Old Pejeta is also where Alex built his camp over 10 years ago and where he still lives today.
So yeah, we're just heading to camp now. We've just driven on to Old Pejeta. It's a very diverse conservancy. It's got one of the highest indigenous black rhino populations left in Africa. There's white rhinos, there's endangered species. There's Sudan that you would have heard about, the last northern white male who just passed away. You're gonna see, some of the diversity in the next 4 or 5 days of what Old Pejeta can offer, how it does holistic farm management, how it does conservation, and really how it runs and manages 80, 90,000 acres of prime land in a country like Kenya today, and how it tries to put value on that in everything it does. This is one of the very few places left in the world that you can see rhino like this. It's unusual and it's lovely to see them in the day like this, out in the open. So this is a waterhole here. What we got? We've got crown cranes, we've got buffalo, we've got impala, we've got grants, young foal, zebra foal just been born there, next to its mum. Shows you the abundance of wildlife, and that says a huge amount about Old Pejeta.
To learn more about what happens at the Old Pejeta Conservancy, we chat with the CEO, Richard Vine.
We've got 118 black rhinos. That makes us a key one population in Africa. That's any population over 100. And there are only 9 key one populations in the whole of Africa. So we're very significant from a national perspective. We're the biggest population by far in Kenya, and in fact, we're the biggest population in East Africa. It costs us, we estimate, $1.5 million a year just on securing those 118 black rhinos. Not everybody can afford that amount of money over such a relatively small space, including the national parks system. We do not need to rely on money from other people to be able to survive. And we think that's a good model for conservation. I think the most important part about our model is that it maintains the productivity of the land. So if we only had wildlife and tourism, maybe we'd employ 400 people. If we only had cattle, maybe it'd be 400 people. If you put the two together, suddenly you're employing 800 to 900 people.
Aren't you the biggest employer in this county?
So we're the biggest employer in this county, we're the biggest taxpayer in this county. If you think about the position of county, they're in a situation where 70% of people in this county don't have a job. You know, most people are reliant upon the land. So the land is becoming fragmented to sub-economic levels. You've got pastoralist issues as pastoralist populations grow. Okay, by 2050, it's going to be 100 million people, so it's going to be double. Where the hell are these people all going to go? And so that's the challenge. How the hell are we going to maintain this space at the same time as looking after the needs of those people, which is a legitimate requirement of government? The point is, if we don't do that, you can say goodbye to places like this, because there's no government in the world that can sit by and allow us to occupy this if we're not addressing that issue.
I agree.
The answer is not to create conservancies where there is no productivity. Even if you are saving rhinos and elephants, the answer is to create profitable, productive models that employ people and pay tax at the same time as creating conservation space.
Next, we speak with Elodie, who runs marketing and social media for Old Pejeta.
I think the power of social media has really transformed the way we do conservation. So it's changed how we can communicate about conservation. Having said that, I find that it takes a crisis, such as the death of Sudan, to get any kind of momentum or a reaction from really enough people in the world that it makes a difference. So, you know, with Old Pejeta, we reach every month about 4 million people a month, okay, on social media, between Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and a bit of YouTube. But when Sudan died, our reach for that month, because I calculated every month, was 29 million people. It's just really sad that just like every piece of news in the world, it always has to be about somebody dying or, you know, a volcano erupting or, you know, stuff like that.
Some tragedy.
Disaster.
And Sudan was certainly the biggest one.
He was. I think now comes the challenge for me because the girls are left and nobody cares about the girls for some weird reason.
I was going to ask that
Maybe
exact
because they're
question.
women. They're actually more important for the survival of the species that Sudan ever was. You know, he couldn't reproduce, his sperm had dried up. So, I mean, he was serving no use other than being an icon and the fact that he was the last male. The girls, if the girls go tomorrow, that's it, you know, because they're the last repository of egg on the planet.
Raise that question. What do you see the future of those two females now?
Listen, if we put a rhino calf on the ground, the story is not over, okay? So if we manage to get the eggs and we do that safely, we'll get attention for the story again. We're getting criticized because it's going to cost $10 million to do this, okay? We can't spend $10 million for a problem we created because we went and killed all of them. I think it's our responsibility.
That evening, we take a safari drive around Old Pejeta and are treated to multitudes of wildlife, including a committee of vultures.
Hunter, you know, that picture we saw of your family on a kill with vultures squawking and making all the din they do. This is actually becoming, believe it or not, a rare sight. They've been decimated. I mean, hundreds, thousands poisoned.
Poisoned by poachers?
Poisoned by poachers. They've been poisoned because of wildlife. If a lion kills something on their land, they'll poison the carcass. And then anything that touches that carcass, jackals, hyenas, birds, vultures, lions, the whole ecosystem is wiped out. And these guys have have been decimated. They've probably lost 90% of their population in the last 20 years. 90%. When Old Pejeta was created way back, it was an island of cattle amongst a sea of wildlife. It is now an island of wildlife amongst a sea of human habitation and cattle. We've got really some of the infrastructure that a ranch needs. We've got a spray race. It's a car wash for cattle. If you have wildlife, your numbers of ticks and the diseases that they carry is very high. So, because there's wildlife here, Old Pejeta have to put their cattle through a spray race every 5 days. If you don't have wildlife, you only have to spray race your cattle once every 3 weeks. So there's a huge economic cost to have wildlife.
So Alex, one of the things when we look at that footage we have of them shooting the rhinos, or we read about it in the journals, especially the one where they chase away the dodo after killing the mother, how did you feel about reading and watching those versus, here we are now looking at these and knowing that there's very few left?
I can accept completely it was a different time, because I know that my grandfather would have never done that if there was only 80 left or 100 or 800 in the world. He would have never done that. Then there was hundreds of thousands of them, and it was beyond comprehension in 1937 that they would become extinct. Look at that animal, he's a dinosaur. He's lived on this earth for tens of thousands of years. He has no predators apart from us, and he's pursued to the point of extinction because of his horn, which is keratin, hair, and what your fingernail is made of. Really, what threat does that pose us? None, and never really has. We'll be so much poorer for not having them part of our lives.
That evening, we speak with the Honourable Sarah Kirei, who is the very first female to represent Laikipia as a member of parliament in Kenya's government.
Sarah she's our local MP. She plays a huge role in how this district, county, region goes forward, its future. What are our greatest challenges that we face, and what is our greatest strength? Dada, please go ahead. Dada means sister, and it's a form of respect.
Yes.
And so Dada, just tell me.
Our biggest challenge is the issues surrounding land. With the growing population, the diminishing resources, and the competition for livelihoods between the farmers, the pastoralists, the ranchers, the conservancies. It's brought a lot of conflict in the past. And then, of course, it is fueled by, a lot of politics surrounding land and land issues. Now, the biggest threat is nomadic pastoralism, which, with the current type of life, with the climate change, with the diminishing resources, nomadic pastoralism is becoming harder and harder to sustain day by day. Initially, a lot of people saw conservation as a foreign concept. But in real sense, conservation is not foreign because the Maasai people has conserved the wildlife, the environment more than everybody through their traditional knowledge. Slowly, people are starting to appreciate that conservation is not a foreign thing. It's not about just conserving the wildlife. It's about the environment. It's about the well-being of the communities. You know, if I had my one wish would be that people come to realize that climate change is real and change is inevitable. Like, we really have to change the way we do our business, the way we keep our livestock, the way, we really have to change.
The next morning, we visit the Old Pejeta headquarters to speak with Samuel, who runs the conservation department.
The entire system is under pressure from populations that are now getting closer and closer to protected areas. And that has a recipe for what we call human-wildlife conflict issues. So that's one challenge, human-wildlife conflict increasing as a result of both increase in wildlife populations with better management, as well as also human population increase, generally because of a rate of reproduction. But then again also comes around about other social evils, poaching. To sustain these growing populations, there will always be
pressure on the wildlife.
So poaching is an issue. Conservation stands a chance. But conservation without cognizance that there are other competing land uses that will need to be managed within the same landscape may not work. We can have a Laikipia,
space,
for example, that has a healthy population of human beings and a healthy population of wildlife living
cooperatively.
Coexistent is the word.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Finally, we visit Old Pejeta's security headquarters and speak to Daniel, whose team protects the Conservancy's 90,000 acres of land.
Security work is completely difficult. Number one, it will be difficult if you don't have information. So we have internal and external informers. Those are the people that we rely on to give us information. Secondly, we work hand in hand with the Kenyan government, this is KWS and Kenya Police. So we normally share any information that they come across.
So, Daniel, if there was one wish, if there was one thing that you could really change about what you do or your work or whatever, what would it be?
My wish is not only to Old Pejeta, but to the entire Kenyan wildlife. My wish is to see people changing their perspective of thinking, or how they think towards wildlife, and start seeing it on a positive way. They join us in conserving these endangered species like elephant and rhinos especially. Giving an example, northern white. People focused positively. At least we could not be talking of two remaining in the planet. I think it's a shame to the manhood. And this demonstrates how human beings are careless toward the wildlife.
Fantastic, and I couldn't agree more with you. Okay, so a more difficult question now. How do you think we go about that?
Basic education to the society. Especially Pejeta, we have started bringing in the community for game drives, complementaries, so that they can understand what is happening inside these fences.
Because they don't understand.
Because they don't understand. If the government can create initiatives where people or citizens of Kenya can be allowed to access national parks, conservancies at a lower charges, and if possible free of charge, and be given that civic education of the importance of wildlife, I think it can change. Slowly we change the mentality or the thinking capacity of people.
After meeting the security team that protects all the wildlife at Old Pejeta, we meet the last two remaining northern white rhinos in the world. They are a mother and daughter named Najin and Fatou. Our last stop, the rhino graveyard to see Sudan's resting place alongside the other rhinos who have lived on Old Pejeta.
Hunter, I wanted to bring you here because, every one of these tells an amazing story. Some had a wonderful life, like Morani. Ringo was an incredible little guy. I always felt if you put him and Putin and, your president together, I don't know who, Kim Jong-un together, peace would reign. Some I really got to know. Max was an amazing rhino. He was sadly poached here.
What do you think our grandparents, our parents would think about seeing this today?
I think, they'd be very moved, and I think they would really realize the true state of conservation and wildlife as it is today. Very different to what it is in theirs day, when conservation was an alien concept. The first national parks were being created then. And now places like Old Pejeta kind of lead the way in conservation, in management, in communities, in education, schools and all of that. So I think they would. Sudan, when he was born in 1973, did he really know that he was the last of his type, of his species? Imagine that.